Let the meeting begin. This is the meeting of the Morrison County Board of Adjustment, public hearing. Please stand and join me in the pledge to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, you may be recognizing some of this as was read by Clint earlier, but a little bit of difference. Okay, I have a few items covered before we get started. Please sign in at the door if you have not already done so. Please put any electronic devices on silent mode at this time. Also, please note that all testimony is being recorded for the record. It is the task of the Board of Adjustment to consider requests of variances and appeals from an order, requirement, or decision made by a county zoning official in accordance with state law and county ordinance. Each request is considered on its own merit. The burden of proving a practical difficulty rests with the applicant. If a variance is granted, it is granted to the land, not to the landowner. Members of the Board of Adjustment are appointed by the County Board of Commissioners with one member from each of the 5 commissioner districts. Land Services staff is here to assist the Board of Adjustment with its duties. I'm going to give a brief overview of our proceedings this evening. The chair will read the variance request. While I'm reading your requests, I would ask that the applicant or the representative come forward and have a seat in the front of the board. The applicant or representative will be asked to state their name and address for the record. Land Services staff will provide a staff report for the requested variance and read any correspondence that has been received regarding the request. The applicant and/or representatives will provide any input, corrections, concerns, comments, etc. Once the applicant or representative have provided their testimony, the board will discuss the request and ask questions of the staff or applicant or their representatives. Upon completion of the board questions, we'll ask if there's anyone in the audience wishing to speak to this request. If there is, that person will be asked to come up to the podium, state their name and address for the record, and give their testimony. Items to note when providing comment: be as factual as possible. Neighborhood endorsement or opposition in and of itself is not a valid reason to approve or deny an application. In order for the board to evaluate your comments, we need to know your reasons for input on the application. All statements or questions must be directed to the chair, not to the applicant, nor will the applicant direct questions or statements to the public. Once all comments have been received, any questions posed to the chair will be addressed at the close of the public hearing. When all testimony is complete, we will close the public hearing. Once the hearing is closed, there will be no further input from the audience, from the applicant, or Land Services staff, unless recognized by the chair, or if one of the board members wants to come or wants some type of clarification. The board will review and discuss the finding of fact criteria questions. The findings are a series of questions that the board is required to answer based on Minnesota statute and the requirements of the ordinance. Based upon the answers to these questions, the board will then vote on each question. All questions must be answered in the affirmative by the board to grant the request. The board may also place conditions on the request if it deems necessary in order to remediate any negative finding of fact. Once the findings are complete, there will be a motion to approve or deny the request based upon these findings. That will conclude the public hearing, and you can leave if you wish. Any follow-up questions should be directed to the Land Services staff during regular business hours. Okay, with that mouthful being said, will the applicant please come forward?
Mr. Chair, how about election of officers first?
Oh, well, you can come forward or you can sit there, either way. You could be really up close for the election of officers. You might even be one. Okay, officers, is there anyone interested in being chair? Anybody interested in nominating somebody for chair? I would nominate Brent for chair, Brent Lindgren.
I would nominate Dave Stish to remain chair.
I think it's somebody else's turn, but anyway, go ahead. Marv?
Mr. Chair, I would like to second a nomination of Brent as a chair.
We don't need seconds, but go ahead. All right, are there any other nominations for chair besides Brent and myself? Okay, nominations for chair will close and we'll proceed to vote. All in favor of Brent, since he was nominated first, being chairperson, answer by saying aye. I'll do a roll call. Marv,
Aye.
Brent,
Nay.
John.
Nay.
John, what'd you say?
Nay.
You said nay. Okay. Myself is aye. And Clint,
Nay.
Ooh.
conspiracy. So, all right, then there is one nominee left, right? Is that how I understand it? All right. All in favor of me being chair again for the 99th year? Go ahead. Marv,
Aye.
Brent,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
myself, just like
Aye.
Clint's answer.
Aye.
Okay. I will gladly be chair again. Vice chair, any nominations?
I would nominate Brent for that.
Are you willing to take that nomination, Brent?
Sure.
Okay, any other nominations? Okay, we'll proceed to vote. In favor, say aye. I'll do a roll call. Marv,
Aye.
Brent,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
myself, aye. Clint.
Aye.
All right, and the secretary, who never ever has to do anything. That'd be a good position for John, because he's a newbie. Marv, are you willing to do chair again, or secretary again?
Well, you recommended John, so I'm going to recommend John.
Any other nominations?
I move nomination cease.
All right. Well, okay, we'll do the same roll call vote. Marv, are you in favor? All in favor, say aye. Marv?
Aye.
Brent?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Myself is aye. And Clint?
Aye.
We have officers, great. I think the candidate can come forward now, or candidate, applicant. You could be a candidate, too. Okay, please state your name and address for the record.
Dale Lund at 11509 Oregon Avenue North, Champlin, Minnesota, 55316.
Okay, thank you. Also for the record, I'd like to say that we were all out on a viewing last Friday, the 24th, all 5 of us and Amy and another staff member. So we had a pretty good viewing of the property.
Okay.
All right, with that said, would you like to, staff report. I'm getting ahead of myself. Amy's ready with that?
Yes, Mr. Chair. This is a variance request to expand a nonconforming structure, and it's located in Section 13 of Agram Township. The ordinance references for this request is Section 301, 301.6A, 706.1, and 706.3. Here's a plat map of Agram Township, and the red dot is the location of this parcel. And then here's the variance request received from the applicant. And then a site drawing also provided by the applicant. And then, Mr. Chair, this was not in your packet, but I believe I did send it along, and this is a drawing of the septic system layout. And then here's an aerial photograph of the parcels outlined in blue and yellow. And then some oblique imagery of the property. And then a shoreline view as well. And then here are the site photos taken at the viewing on the 24th. Again, the property is in Section 13 of Agram Township, and it's on Piers Lake, which is a general development lake. The property is made up of 3 parcels, and together they are a non-conforming single lot, which means it's less than 30,000 square feet and 120 feet wide. The property is 120 feet wide and 23,390 square feet. There is a steep slope on the property, but a surveyor has determined that bluff conditions do not exist. And then here is an aerial photograph with the elevation contours on, and then the letter from the surveyor. According to the assessor's records, the 1,264 square foot dwelling with a full basement was built in 1955. The dwelling is 57 feet from the lake, and the deck is 43 feet from the lake. The home was built prior to land use controls. An approximately 9,040 square foot building envelope is available on the property. And then here is that drawing. The applicant purchased the property in 2003, and the applicant is requesting a variance to place a 465 square foot addition with a full basement beneath onto the existing home. The addition would be on the road side of the cabin and within the building envelope. The intention is to convert the use of the cabin from seasonal to a full-time residence. No additional bedrooms are proposed with the addition. If this addition is granted, the roof of the structure would be replaced. The current roof pitch is 412. The new roof pitch would be 612. Overall height would still be compliant and not subject to a variance. The septic system consists of a tank and drain field. The last inspection was performed in 2016 and it was found to be compliant. The impervious surface, including the addition, is 22.57%. 25% impervious surface is allowed. And then here's the submitted impervious surface calculation. The applicable comprehensive land use plan goals is natural resources and open spaces, goal C2, shoreline development, goal D1. And then the applicable Morrison County comprehensive water plan goals and objectives is the surface water goal, objective B, land use and development goal, objectives B and D. 107 notices were sent. At the time I wrote this, there was no comment, but we did receive one today, and that was from Don Cheetah from the Agram Township Board, and he was speaking in his capacity as a town board member, and he stated that the township does not have any issue with this variance request. Okay, and then here you're finding the fact and decision questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Amy. Does the applicant have anything to add to that?
No.
Okay. All right, then, board members, you have questions for staff or for the applicant?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, John?
sir, where the retaining walls are on the side of on the lake side of the home, at the top of those retaining walls, what type of surface exists there?
Between the house and the retaining wall?
Yes, sir.
The first 2 feet are rocks with fiberglass, or that matting down for, keep the weeds from growing up through it, and then the rest of it's grass.
Okay. Thank you.
Along that same line, the other terraces that are below that,
Oh, it's sand.
do they have vegetation on them, or are they,
No.
okay?
Well, the hill is all grass, but between the 2 retaining walls down by the lake is sand.
But no plastic underneath them, or,
Just where the water can drain through, and it isn't plastic, it's that
Okay.
fiber.
all right, just curious about that.
Yeah, no.
Okay, any other questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Clint.
Okay, looking at the drawing, tell me if it's correct with the sewer. It states that you're, sure you can, I guess, yeah. So the tank's 25 feet away from the house right now, is that correct? We'll give you a minute
Let me
to,
look at the one like that. Well, by that, yes, it looks like 25 from here.
that's what I would say when we were out there. That was where that stake was that was put out in the snow, correct?
Correct, that's,
Okay. So if that sewer tank's 25 feet away from the dwelling, yeah, there's that stake. The sewer tank has to be 25 feet away, correct, Amy?
No, the tank needs to be 10 feet
Okay.
from the dwelling.
Okay.
The drain field needs to be 20.
Okay, that's where I want a clarification. Okay, so if it's 25 feet away now, so you got 10, you got 15 and 8, so you're gonna be you're still gonna be a little bit short.
well, on this drawing that I have, it shows 28.
Okay.
I can bring it up to you if you like.
Mr. Chair, the drawing that he has and the drawing that I have are from compliance inspections that were done. And generally, when the inspector will lay out the drawing of the system, and sometimes knowing exactly where, because it's a buried tank, knowing exactly where the edge of that tank is a little tricky. And so I can see where he's showing 28, we're showing 25. One of the things we would be doing as part of the permit check would be, we would be doing our own measurement to ensure that that meets the 10-foot setback from the tank.
Thank you. Clint?
I think that's what I had for right now, is I just wanted to address that sewer. It's really tight, that's all.
Well, that's
Yep,
one I have from the,
yep.
that I received from the county, from the guy that installed it was.
I guess I will bring it up, being we're talking. So it's hard to tell because there's snow and stuff, but we look at where this addition's gonna go, so that's gonna be the north side of the house, right?
Right, facing
Okay.
it.
So the way it looks by the lay of the land, it looks like, kinda just a little ways from where that sewer tank is. That's probably the crest of the land, you know? To me, just looking how, you know, your house is here and here's the road, it kinda looks like that land goes like this. Is that a good assessment?
I think it kind of slopes towards the road, but
No
it
slope.
could be a little higher there because of
Yeah.
the sidewalk there, and it's
Okay.
kind of have a,
So just so you know, for my thing, if we'd allow this addition to go on, part of this was the impervious surface and all this and all the water that goes to the lake. I appreciate you got gutters on your house, you got gutters on the garage. The garage kind of goes away, but the house, it's still, even though it goes to the north, there's a downgrade. All the water's still going to the lake. So that's why it's hard to tell right here. I would like to see the gutters go to the north on the house, and maybe you'd have to put like an underground pipe for a little distance to get the water to come to the north instead of, because even if you put the addition on, it's hard to tell in the snow. It looks like that water's gonna come right off the house and then it's still gonna go back to the lake. So that's one of my concerns, was just to get that water. You got gutters and stuff on there, you're trying to divert the water, but there isn't a natural slope that way. It just comes around and goes. So that was just something that I wanted to bring up.
yeah, that wouldn't be a problem.
Okay, thank you, Clint. Anything else to add to that?
No?
Okay. Any other questions at this time?
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead,
So obviously, when we came out there and with all the snow and all, we couldn't see how the impervious surface towards the lakeside. And, you know, this is quite important for us because, you know, we like lakes, and the quality of lake water is quite important, especially in Morrison County. We take it to heart. And here, Clint talked about guttering away from the lake. One thing, a question for the impervious surface. You have the retaining walls, the concrete, I believe they're concrete blocks. Are they considered part of the impervious surface also?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Amy, you can answer that.
So the retaining walls themselves, yes, they would, you know, for the width that they are. And then depending on, you know, sometimes if there's a flat spot, we look at what the prep is underneath. So if it's vegetated, but it's got a real tightly woven fabric that percolates at a shorter time frame than what water would perk in the natural soil, then we consider that impervious. If the perk rate on the fabric that's laid down is as quicker than the native soil, then we do not count it as impervious surface.
Okay, thank you. Next is more so, what is it, a comment. Part of our Morrison County comp plan is to bring things into conformity. And are we creating more of a nonconformity by allowing this? Just something to think about here. And here, something that, you know, obviously we couldn't see what much it was on the lakeside. And I look at compromise being, hey, what can we do to allow to bring things more into conformity? And just thoughts on that.
Thank you, Marv. Anybody else have any questions? I've got a few. That's okay. You're familiar with what a nonconformity is?
Yes.
And you have a nonconforming lot, it's undersized, 30,000 is a standard lot. Yours is 23 some thousand feet. You do have a shoreline that is conforming, 120 feet, which is good. So you don't have as much of a lot to put things in as a conforming lot would have. So space is an issue. You have a very steep slope on your property. It's very close to being a bluff. And if it were a bluff, if it were considered a bluff, your house would be within the bluff. And I don't think we've ever okayed an expansion of a residence that's located in the bluff. If we have, it's been, every condition or every property is different, but, yeah. If it was a bluff, it would be entirely in the bluff or in the bluff impact zone. Okay, with that in mind, I looked on Beacon and, everything isn't entirely accurate there, but from the shoreline to the back of your house, I calculated that to be a 33% slope. That's quite a big slope. A bluff is 30% or greater slope, or, slope. But it isn't a bluff because it isn't quite long enough of a slope. So you're about 5 or 6 feet off on length of slope from being a true bluff. And then we'd be considering different things here today. But with that in mind, it is bluff-like. It certainly has all of the issues that a bluff would have in that you've got, a sharp, descent to the shoreline. You bought the property in 2003, is that correct?
Correct.
Have you made any changes to the property since you purchased it?
Just change those retaining walls.
No, I mean,
Well,
any
oh,
changes at all?
no.
Nothing has had to be done to the retaining walls, no maintenance or anything? Okay,
I improved, I put in better, nicer looking retaining walls.
okay. You
mind.
replaced something you already had,
Yes.
which, when a non-conforming property, that is your right to replace exactly what you've got, to repair exactly what you've got, but not to expand what you've got. Marv had a good point. By allowing this, well, we know we'd be allowing an expansion of a nonconformity, which ordinance tells us we shouldn't be doing. In fact, ordinance intention is to reduce the number of conformities, eventually eliminating, but we know that's not going to happen. I mean, you've got a nice property, you've got a nice structure there. It seems to be pretty stable with the use you've got on it. But by adding more to a non-conforming lot, to a non-conforming structure, it leverages it all in the wrong direction, all towards a lake. I think Clint's point was well taken that, looking at your property there, I don't think you have a plan for addressing water runoff. You haven't come forward with one. Again, as Clint stated, we'd all like to see it running away from the house. I don't know if that's even a possibility. I also looked at your answers to your questions, and as I read in the opening statement, it's the applicant's responsibility to define what the practical difficulty on the property is. Your application, you state, question is the practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? Okay, and that's what a practical difficulty is, unique to the property, not unique to your needs or not unique to your wishes, but unique to the property that limits you from doing anything else. And your answer was, yes, we are limited by where our septic and well are located. That's an okay answer, but at the same time, there's a slide here that identifies that you have a 9,000 square foot building area, which would meet all setbacks and would not, and if you relocated a building there, would be a conforming structure, which you would not need, if it was placed in the right spot, you would not need variances to make changes to in the future. You do have a building envelope on your property, which makes it almost impossible to come up with a practical difficulty. We haven't weighed in on that question yet, but I don't think your question is an adequate answer, because there probably is another place for the septic tank. There is another place for the garage in that building envelope. You know, I'm not suggesting that that's what you should do, because if somebody told me that and I had what you have, I'd say you're crazy. You'd do more disruption to the property than it would be worth. So, for the most part, you know, I think people are underinformed when they buy a property, you know, that, you know, you've got what you've got. It's a non-conforming structure, very unlikely that you'll get anything added onto it, unless you have a unique practical difficulty, unique to the property. So my question back to you is there anything unique about the property other than, well, it's got a very steep
Well-
slope, it's got, it's a small undersized property, but that's not unique. We got all kinds of those properties in the county.
I mean, that house was built in 55, I met the requirements then.
Mm-hmm.
But now, to make it, you're asking me to completely tear down a perfectly good home, tear down a perfectly good garage. You've seen the big oak trees, they'll have to come down, and all the other, I'm looking at 7 or 8 trees that have to come.
Yeah.
What will that do to the property?
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm not asking you to do that. I'm just
Well,
saying that
that's
that's
what-
an
you know.
option, yeah.
'Cause I'd have to move everything back towards the road, and those oak trees are gonna come down, and they've been there, what, a couple hundred years? I have no idea. And those are very nice trees.
Yeah. I don't know, could we have a photo of that, Amy? I really didn't see any trees towards the road that seemed to be old trees or,
Dead center. There's one right in front of the garage, one right on the side of the garage. Whoever took the picture, there's a huge oak tree right to the left of you.
okay, yeah. I assume it depends on where you'd locate it to meet setbacks and whatever, but,
I mean, that's, the difficulty is to completely tear down everything I have to move it back 25 feet. Because half the house is conforming, it's back far enough.
yeah, I
And that
understand.
would drastically change that, the way that property looks.
Yeah.
And not in a good way, I don't think.
Theoretically, it would improve the property, it'd be, meet the setbacks, it would, you'd have
That aspect, but
ability to run water towards the road rather than the lake, but the deconstruction would be, raise havoc with
Yeah.
that hillside.
Oh, absolutely. And that hillside, if you look at both sides, my neighbors are lower than I am. So I would assume when they built this home, they hauled in a lot of that dirt that made that bluff. Because it's flat and level. Both my neighbors are significantly lower than I am, so,
Yes, it is what it is.
yeah. So I was,
Yeah. All right. Anything to add to that, board members?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Clint.
I just had to add something to think here. So this is a nonconformity. Part of it is because the lot's nonconformity, part of it's because he's too close to the lake. But just something to think about. If you add this addition, what he's proposing, 465 square feet, you're using 20% would be used up of the 9,000 square feet buildable area, okay? So that means there's 80% left. This lot is 80% of what it needs to be. So if you want to just do a comparison, and that's not right, but it's just, I just wanted just to think that there is a ton of buildable area here. It's not overdeveloped on the land, but probably in the wrong place.
Thank you, Clint. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, John?
you know, when we look at homes like this and what's being proposed right now, and you're changing the pitch of the roof, and you're gonna have a steeper slope on the roof, obviously moving water a little faster. If the house wasn't there and you had a lot like this, it would, I'm guessing the water would go into the lake, right? Except for the stuff that fell on the flat part of the actual property. When you're looking at what you've actually proposed, you're talking about a 30% increase to square footage and only 3% overall, what you just referenced, Mr. Catherine, to the impervious surface. So I just want that noted for the record.
Okay. Anything else, John?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right. Other input? Questions? If not, we'll go to the public hearing. And welcome anybody out in the audience to come forward and speak for or against. Is there anybody that would like to speak on this variance request? I have to ask 3 times. Anybody would like to speak on this variance request? Last time, is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this variance request? As there are none, we'll close that portion of the meeting, the public hearing portion of the meeting. All right, with that, are we ready to go to the questions? You want to think of any? You're familiar with our process here, that we have these questions to answer. They all, 6 questions have to be answered to the affirmative. We have to give valid reasons for our answers, yes or no. Before we start that process, any other input from you? Okay. All right.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Clint.
I'd like to put a condition on that, all the water that comes off of the gutters of this proposed, what's existing and proposed would, somehow get directed to the north towards the road, whether it be an underground pipe or something that would get it to get to the downward slope. I think that would help with a lot of the water getting to the river, or to the lake, I mean. So I think, I was kind of looking at it that day. I'm not saying how to do it, but I don't think it'd be that hard. So I'd like to put a condition on that. We'd divert that water from the gutter system to head towards the road somehow.
So are you proposing a stormwater plan that could be actually implemented, or you're just suggesting some ideas that would get it done? Not very enforceable unless we put some teeth into it, I assume.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Amy.
I would suggest that you would have a condition that upon permitting, when he comes in for his permit, that he provide a plan for how that is going to work, that our shoreland specialist would review, and then also follow up to make sure that it's been implemented and that it's working as.
Installed properly.
Correct.
Yeah, okay,
Okay, that's what my motion is, or that's what my condition is.
okay. All right, anybody else before we tackle the questions? All right, first question then is the variance request in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan? Let's see, we'll start out with, I like starting at the beginning, Marv, don't I? Marv, I'd like to start with Marv.
Well, as I made a comment before, adding to a nonconformity doesn't fit with the Morrison County comp plan. With one of the conditions added, it does bring it closer into conformity, but there were, it's not enough to, in my opinion, to bring things in harmony, what we'd like to see in our comp plan.
Okay. Anybody else? Going to Brent? I'll just name you, call your names. And Brent, anything to add?
I would just add, the opposite of what Marv just proposed there. I think it is in harmony with the purposes and the intent, in that he has a non-conforming lot and a non-conforming building on 3 lots sitting on a lake with the home that was built in 1955. The only relief that he can get is to come to this board and request a variance, and so in that regard, I think it's in harmony.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's true, Brent. In that regard, it is in harmony, and that anybody has the right to come forward and request relief from ordinance. So the request is in harmony with that part of the ordinance, but the part of the ordinance that states, that deals with nonconformities, this is a nonconforming structure, a nonconforming lot, most of the impervious surface, or much of the impervious surface, is within the shore impact zone. Really, some of the I know the applicant did a nice job on measuring impervious surface, and I trust his figures, but I don't know that all of the impervious surface was measured and added into the total. It's very close to being at the max of 25%. If there is other impervious surface there, which, obviously, at our viewing, there's no way for us to know, it'd be over that threshold. And it's beyond the intent of what impervious surface is intended by the ordinance, and that's not to be in all of it within the shore impact zone or within the setback to the lake, but distributed evenly around the property rather than shoreside, especially with a 33% slope. So by adding insult to injury, I think it's impossible to meet the intent of the ordinance, which is preservation of resources, water quality, natural-looking shorelines. It is what it is. It's a nice property. It looks good. It's stable. I think anything added to that would make it unstable, more unstable. And the applicant didn't come forward with a plan to, a watershed plan or any kind of a shoreline plan. So that's my take on that. Clint, anything to add?
I'd kind of like to just agree with what Brent said, but add to it that, and what Mr. Smith said, I take wholeheartedly. I think with the condition, I think that kind of mitigates a lot of the impervious surface. You look at majority of the impervious surface in this lot is the dwelling itself. Now, if we can make through that condition, get rid of all that water that comes off of that portion of the impervious surface, which is the majority of it, I think even by putting this addition on, we just made that a lot better as far as water going to the lake. Where if this wouldn't get done, stay status quo, and right now he has everything guttered and tried, but it's still running to the lake. So here's a way that we actually can fix it. Somewhat. We can't make everything perfect, we all know that. So I think, to me, with what Brent stated, with the condition, and I do think that it would be in harmony with the intent. It's just my 2 cents.
Okay. Thank you, Clint. John, anything to add?
I completely agree with Brent and Clint, and full support on their comments.
Okay. Thank you. Question number 2, is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the land use ordinance? So starting out with you, Brent.
I think he's proposing to use it in a reasonable manner. The cabin is built in 1955, and I refer to it as a cabin. Now he's at a point in life that he's proposing a moderate expansion to that cabin to make it a full-time livable residence. So he's proposing to use it in a reasonable manner. It's still going to be a lake home. Instead of a cabin, it's going to be where somebody lives full-time, and they want to be able to enjoy that. So I think he's proposing it reasonably.
Okay, thank you. My turn. Yeah, I guess we can't mistake reasonable use with use, personal use. Yes, it's reasonable to want an addition on your house. It's reasonable to want to retire to a property that you've had for a number of years and enjoy. And you'd like to enjoy it more by making a better property out of it, or better living quarters. But what the question isn't that. The question is reasonable in a manner not permitted by land use ordinance, which is expansions of nonconformities, and especially on nonconforming in such a fragile piece of property. It's a very, again, a steep slope. There's no way any one of us can look at this and not say that the proposal is intensifying a use that already jeopardizes that property. I mean, it's been stable for all these years, that's good. Adding more to it, I can't see that as being anywhere near in a reasonable request according to ordinance. All right, Clint.
No further comment.
Okay, John?
I would say it would be unreasonable if you were building toward the lake or asking for it toward the lake, but because you're coming toward the street, I think it's more than reasonable, not permitted by the land use ordinance.
Thank you. And Marv?
Mr. Chair, I do agree with some of the comments that were made, that it is more so reasonable coming towards the road than the lake. And does it make sense? It's a beautiful lot, absolutely gorgeous lot. And adding to a nonconformity, that's where I'm just concerned about. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marv. On to question number 3. Will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? Okay, I start out on this one. At first I thought, the other structures alongside it are about the same. Would anybody notice from the lake? The roof line the proposal is to raise up the roof line, make it a steeper roof line. I think it would be obvious that something had changed there, by a passerby from the road or from the lake. And the trouble with that is, I think people will notice that there was a change there. And I think there'd be a fair number of people that would be in my camp of, by golly, that's a steep slope there, and yet, and it looks like it's too close to the lake, and it looks like, there's been an addition there. Maybe mine isn't so bad, maybe I should do the same thing, We do sometimes get these effects by issuing a variance. The neighbor thinks, well, that's a good idea, I'm going to do the same thing, And the essential character of the neighborhood locality is non-conforming structures, too close to the lake, too small lots, probably, stuff in the shore impact zone that shouldn't be there. But I'm saying that it would not maintain the essential character. It would magnify the essential character, which is non-conforming and, in my mind, non-compliant, but non-conforming, and not good for the lake or for the public. Clint.
I would disagree just a little bit. I think once the project would be done, during construction, they're gonna notice it. I think once the project's done, I think very few, unless it's an actual neighbor that's used to looking at that house and fishes there every single day, they're not gonna know the difference at the pitch of the roof. That's about all they're gonna see, unless they go down by the roadside. And I think once the project's done, you're not gonna know, okay? If going back to what my one condition was, I would think that would take it out of the essential character, because I don't think any of the other ones that live close would have anything like that to help with the water benefit of it. But But I don't know. I think the central character, they're all kind of built up on top of the hill. I see what Dave says about the roof pitch and all that, but I really don't think you'll see that. If we added an extra story onto the house, most definitely, or if there's a big addition on the lakeside, I think with it being on non-lakeside, it's 10 feet plus a little entry thing. Once the construction's all done, I don't think people won't even notice it, so I think it's gonna just maintain what's already there as far as what people see.
Okay, thank you, Clint. Oh, we've got a Dave on our schedule here. John, anything to add?
No, nothing to add.
Okay, Marvin, anything?
Mr. Chair, I kind of agree with Clint. I don't think you'd hardly notice as deep as that driveway is and everything else in oak trees. I think it would fit in there very well. So I don't think you'd hardly notice it.
Okay, and Brent, anything to add?
Just along those same lines, I think when I was out there on Friday, I counted, I might be off, but I think there was 16 trees on the property. Some of those are pretty mature trees that hopefully wouldn't be affected by this. As far as, yeah, as far as the essential character of the locality, this is all lake homes along there. Some are closer and some are further back. And I would agree that once construction is done, there's not going to be much change here.
Okay, thank you. On to question number 4. Is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? Starting out with you, Clint?
Okay, I guess one thing I differ with the applicant is, where does he put where the the septic tank is and all that? You can move that, so that, to me, that's not part of the practical difficulty. But I believe with the house being built in 1955, rules change. I know we can't use them, but with that being said, with all the big trees that are in the area, to do anything different, to add some kind of living space farther back on the property, basically to the roadside of the property, it just ain't feasible. So I think that's where the practical difficulty comes in with me, is just with all them trees, kind of the time frame and all the different things. And as far as I know, we can't use ordinance changes and all that for a practical difficulty, but it is still part of it. It's nice that this application, this request is all out of it meets setback. The existing structure doesn't. I know we're adding to a structure that's already, in that don't meet setbacks, but this doesn't. So I don't know how else you could just add anything to it. Not saying that you should add to every project, but he's got 9,000 feet building envelope. But somebody tell me how he can use it other than adding on to this. So that's where my practical difficulty is. He has 9,000 square feet building envelope, but how else can he utilize that without moving it to the north, rebuilding 100%, and destroying that whole top of that hill with all them trees and stuff? That's where I come up with the practical difficulty, I guess.
Okay, thank you, Clint. And John, anything to add?
Very similar. It'd be impossible to hit the envelope without moving everything, tearing down the trees, rebuilding, and then you're back to new plans and new requests, new permits.
Okay, thank you, John. Marv, anything?
I have nothing to add.
Brent, anything to add?
No, nothing further.
Yeah, practical difficulty. Trees are not bluffs, are not hills, are not rocks, are not immovable. I don't, I understand trees are beautiful and a long time to mature. They can be replaced, they can grow again. That's not an acceptable practical difficulty in my book. Again, it's already a nice size home, a nice size structure, and it fits the property. It's been there for a long time. All of the nonconformities that are on the property have been there for a long time. They've stabilized themselves, become part of the neighborhood. I don't know how we can add on to that because of a personal need felt by the applicant rather than a true practical difficulty. Again, as you stated, there's a 9,000 square foot building envelope, and again, I'm not suggesting you tear down and rebuild there, but there is on the property. So the property itself does not present a capital difficulty or practical difficulty because it does offer a 9,000 square foot building envelope. All right, I guess that's it for number 4, unless somebody would like to add to that. Number 5, the need for the variance is created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners. John, looks like it's your turn. Start us out.
Question, I'm guessing the county land use ordinance are the reasons we're in a non-conforming structure on a non-conforming lot, probably after the property was, or the house was constructed?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Amy.
land use controls went into effect in 1972. So when this home was built, there were no shoreland standards or land use controls to apply to this structure. So when those standards went into place, then that's what made this a nonconformity.
So would it be fair to state that the variance is being requested because of the county ordinance after the fact?
So what we would call that is operation of the ordinance over time. So the requirements have changed over time. We don't use the fact that we have a 75-foot setback as a practical difficulty. The standard in the ordinance is never a practical difficulty, but operation of the ordinance over time as the county essentially, so to speak, changes the game every once in a while is a reason and can be used.
Well, and I ask that because the way the question is worded, created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners, if you bought in 2003 and you have this operational change over time with the ordinance, then there's nothing he did by changing those retaining walls, which was the only thing referenced on the property, and it would have literally just been the ordinance change over time that created this variance request.
The need for the variance.
The need for the variance request?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So is that your explanation for?
Yeah, it was clarification to make sure I was asking the right questions, had the right information, and understood it correctly on behalf of the applicant, or the review. Did I say that right? Sure.
Works for me.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, John. Marvin, anything to add?
No, nothing to add.
Brent, anything to add?
Maybe the only thing I would add there is sometimes these things, are created early on when the lot development was made back in, I don't know when it was made, but probably early 1900s, before 1955, because that's when it was built. So just the mere fact that these lots and surveys were done early on and the lots were made so small, that's prior to the current owner, that's prior to the person that built it. It's just how it was.
Okay. Thank you, Brent. And my turn. Yes, John, a good point. The ordinance, today's ordinance was in effect at the time that the applicant purchased the property in 2003. There were different ordinances way back prior when it was built. But we are in charge of answering these variance requests based on current ordinance. That's our task. And allowing for if there is an established practical difficulty, or established practical difficulty, we can go to the next step and look at the other questions. Is it in line with the intent of the ordinance? And now we're on question number 5. Is the need for this variance created by actions other than the landowner? It's his request, you know? He understands the ordinance. He understands that he's got a non-conforming structure and a non-conforming lot. He hasn't established a practical difficulty. I don't think we have. If we could vote on that right now and find out if we think so. So it's entirely his plans, his personal needs that have driven this request today. My opinion. Okay, Clint, anything to add to that?
The only thing I would say is, you know, we could say every single variance that comes for us is the need of the applicant. I think a lot of this one is, but there's also some of the things that were stated previously on all the questions on, you know, why the need for this variance is. Yes, everybody's here because they want something. It don't matter if it's on this for the variance or if it's for planning and zoning. It don't matter. They're here because of a personal need that's going to be given on every single applicant. I think when you look at some of the other things, as far as what we talked for before about, you know, ordinances change. Yes, I know that, this and that. We're talking back from 1955, all the way this house has been there a long time. We got a ton of buildable space. He's too close to the lake. You throw all them things in there. I think there is some other things that it's not just actions of the landowner or prior landowners. I think there's a lot of small things here and there that can attribute to it. I do recognize what Mr. Stish said, that it is a need that he wants, but I think every single one of these applications that come forward to us are somebody wants something. So that's just what I'd like to add to it.
Okay, thank you, Clint. I guess that's it for number 5. We've had input from everybody. Yeah, number 6, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? Starting out with Marvin.
Absolutely, and the reason why I'm saying is, he thought about, well, okay, I could tear this place down, destroy the hillside, could create erosion to the lake, build that away from the lake, cut down numerous trees, stand out like a sore thumb, wouldn't fit very well in the neighborhood. So it's much more than economic considerations.
Okay, anybody like to add to that? Brent?
I would just add to that, you know, again, it's more than just economics. I mean, it's the way these lots were created, when they were created. It's where this building was actually placed in conjunction with that. It's certainly got to do with trying to make things work regarding where this current sewer location is. It's a tight squeeze, maybe just feet or inches there where things might work. Where the well is, where the garage is, where the driveway is, all of those things are involved here, along with the trees and the lot itself being a lake lot.
Okay, thank you. You know, every one of these questions could be argued either way on any application, not just this one. But we have to look at, you know, what it is. The applicant wants a larger structure. Oh, boy, I would too if I were him. This is the cheapest way to go about doing it, is by his proposal. And probably has the least impact on the property of any additions. But at the same time, it's, you know, if he were to purchase another property that met his needs, that'd be more expensive. A move is always expensive. If, yeah, this is about money. It's, most applications are. This is about saving money and versus using the building envelope. I'm just stating that as something to think about. You know, as a retirement home, I know most people are looking at downsizing. But I understand this is a lake place, and I'm sure you've got lots of friends, probably relatives, family, and that's another thing to consider, you know. This is going to intensify the use of this property, which is already an undersized property. It's more than about money, but it's about a lot of factors that tell us to do our job. Clint, go ahead, if anything to add to that.
I'm good, Mr. Chair.
And John.
I do, yeah, every one of these requests, obviously, whether it's they're all costing money in some way, shape, or form. Somebody's asking to do something. And we don't look at or monitor lake activity as part of the county. But yeah, the disruption to the neighborhood, when you talk about construction and having to dig stuff up, move stuff, cut stuff down, and then just overall, I mean, when you talk about a practical difficulty, the time that it's going to take from not in this home to in this home, that's a significant consideration. We can all get money back, but none of us are making more time in any way, shape, or form. So, you know, I don't know how that sits with my colleagues up here or anybody else that's listening, but that's a big deal.
Thank you. Anything else to add to number 6, anybody? Are we ready to vote on the questions? Okay, looks like we are.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
I'd like
Clint.
Amy to read if we have any conditions. I think we had one. I don't know if there's any more.
Mr. Chair, what I had jotted down for a condition would be, at the time of permitting the addition, the applicant shall submit a plan to direct water coming from the home to be directed to the north towards the road, is what I've got.
Okay, obviously by my comments, I'm hoping this doesn't pass, but if by some strange coincidence it does, I think we need another condition, and that would be a third-party verification of impervious surface on the property.
And Mr. Chair, if that ends up being over,
Then, yeah, I don't know, at least getting it,
then it would need to be reduced or revisited in a variance.
yeah.
So you want a third-party verification?
Well, unless your office has the time or ability to do that, I guess.
Okay.
Oftentimes they don't. I don't know if they
We
do.
generally don't do them for people. We generally, if it's a third party, it would be a surveyor would do that work.
I guess what we're voting on today is a proposed impervious surface of what, 22, or what is it at?
22.577, or
That-
57, sorry.
That would be the impervious surface, the proposed impervious surface.
All right, so would you want the condition then to be that the impervious surface for the property shall not exceed
Yeah,
22.57%, and that shall be verified by a third party?
correct.
Okay.
Right. On to the vote then, or are there any other conditions? Number 1, is the request in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan? Marv?
No.
Brent?
Yes.
Myself is no. Clint?
Yes.
And John?
Yes.
Is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the Land Use Ordinance? Brent?
Yes.
Myself is no. Clint?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
and Marv.
Yes.
Number 3, will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? My answer is no. Clint,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Marv,
Yes.
and Brent.
Yes.
Number 4, is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? We're starting out with Clint on that one.
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Marv,
No.
Brent,
Yes.
and myself is no. Number 5, is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners? Starting out with John,
Yes.
Marv,
Yes.
Brent,
Yes.
myself is no. Clint?
Yes.
Number 6, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? Marvin?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Clint?
Yes.
And John?
Yes.
Okay, looks like all the questions were answered to the affirmative, and there are 2 conditions in place.
If someone makes a motion for both of those conditions, yes.
Okay, is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve this with the 2 conditions.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll second that.
Okay, motion is made and seconded to approve this variance request with the 2 conditions. We'll have a roll vote, starting with, is there any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote on this, starting with Marvin. And if you're in favor, say aye. If you're opposed, say nay. Marvin?
Aye.
Brent?
Aye.
Myself is nay. Clint?
Aye.
And John?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Any questions? Go to Land Services.
Thank you.
Good luck with it. Work with Land Services. And it shows like you've been a good steward of that piece of property. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, it's a nice one.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, I guess we have minutes of the previous meeting. Is there a motion to accept those as presented? I'd make that motion.
I would second that.
Motion is made and seconded. All in favor of accepting the minutes as presented, say aye.
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 Aye. Minutes accepted. Old business, new business?
Mr. Chair, the only thing I want to say is that our next 2 meetings, we're going to have 5 agenda items. So please be very prepared, because we're going to need to move
5 agenda items in each
5
one.
agenda items for the next 2 meetings. And so if we've gotten through 2 in 2.5 hours, that's going to be a really late night. So just be prepared as you can so we can keep them moving.
Equal amounts of
I don't
planning commission,
remember. I don't remember off the top of my head.
or we'll be seeing them soon.
So, yeah.
And we only have 1 meeting in March.
Yes.
Some months we have 3, some months we have 1, most months we have 2.
That's all
Right.
I have, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Who moved?
Brent.
Brent, seconded by Marv. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries. Meeting adjourned, 8:39.